Hello.
Welcome to the Copy Blogger podcast.
Oh, you're not talking to me. Okay.
We are recording on a Saturday this week, so Ethan and I are very thrown off, or at least I'm not going to speak for you, Ethan. I feel very thrown off. I think this is going to be a fun episode since you and I are very, I don't know, creatures of habit. We're like routine, habitual people, and so this could get wild.
I was going to try and hide it, but just so everybody knows, Tim and I have been chatting here for a few minutes, and we're definitely thrown off. You've got your son back at home. Like, this was going to be, some time where, like, things were a little quieter, which I think you're actually probably more excited to have the family home based on what I've heard so far.
Yeah, very much so.
And, for people who didn't hear a couple episodes ago, we were actually thinking of stranding Tim on a desert island because he didn't know what to do with himself during these days where his wife and son were away. And then I just got back from a bachelor party, so I'm literally running on like an hour and a half of sleep. So this could get real interesting, real fast.
Stick with us. We're going to get through this, yeah. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this week. We are going to jump right in where we left off with last episode because we're just doing a really fascinating mini case study here. And I don't know if this means anything. We want your guys' feedback on it. I'm going to, well, actually, before I share my screen, we noticed that it was interesting in my personal newsletter, has about 7,500 subscribers. So not like a huge audience, but a big enough audience to get, some reasonable data points to pay attention to. And when I share the podcast every week on my newsletter, I share 3 links. I share a link to the iTunes. I share a link to the Spotify. And then I also share a link to copybloggerpod.com, which has multiple ways to listen to the episode, including a link to the YouTube video, but it also has the show notes on it. And check it out, Ethan. Ethan doesn't know what I'm about to show him, by the way. We just wanted to run through this. But same thing. So,
same thing as last week.
Yeah, copybloggerpod.com. The link to the website, which has all of the media and the show notes, got the most clicks. It got 14 clicks. And then the link to the Spotify came in second with 6 clicks. And the link to the iTunes came in third with 5 clicks. But this is also really interesting too. Like, let me show it to you. I intentionally did this with the calls to action and the links to see if it would make a difference. So I put click here to listen on iTunes. I know that click here seems a little bit trivial, but it's actually like very, very compelling when you put click here on the link to actually click, and then click here to listen on Spotify. And then underneath it, I put, in addition, you can click here to see the full video with show notes. Mm-hmm. So something to it, man.
Well, So last week we teed this up, and for anybody who's listening to this going like, did I already listen to this episode? We started with a similar thing last week where we had just noticed this. Tim had just noticed this, and this pattern holds true across his newsletter as well as the Copyblogger newsletter. And so we just called it out. We said, hey, if you're one of the people who's clicking these links, holler at us and let us know why, because this is kind of surprising. We would have thought a lot more traffic would go to iTunes and Spotify. And the reason that we wanted to start here this week is because some of you did. So, and I just noticed again, I'm wearing the exact same shirt that I'm wearing in that last thumbnail. I really need okay. So here's the deal this week. If you're still clicking on this, let us know. We have a couple of people who did reach out. And if you have a great source for like good shirts for guys, let me know. Because apparently I need like a much more diverse wardrobe.
Hey, next level, bro. Next level.
Is that a brand or no?
It's a brand that sells blanks, we call them. So if you own like a t-shirt company, you can buy Next Level in wholesale. And it's where I get all of my shirts because I'm shaped like a gazelle, basically. I'm like super long, but like I have swimmer shoulders, so my shoulders are kind of wide. Yeah. So it's the only shirt that actually fits the width of my shoulders, but it's also long enough to where like when I lift my hands over my head, the t-shirt doesn't come above my belt line. So they're my favorite shirts. Next Level.
All right. I'll check them out.
That's the jam.
All that though to say that we had a couple people reach out with some kind of interesting feedback. So April McLean hollered at Tim and I over on Twitter, in like a little group chat, which is cool. I work with April over at The Hustle, and she said this is largely like a UX thing, like the UX on Apple. Like, so our hypothesis was people are paying more attention to the video and like video is becoming the experience. Yeah. And I don't know about, oh, sorry.
No, keep going. It made me think about what the actual,
note was from April. or no?
No, just what the numbers were for the video. Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's true.
Oh yeah, it's getting. So April hollered at us, and she said that wasn't necessarily her, like, why she was clicking it. She was clicking it because the UX on the other two options sucks. And then I heard, so my dad's actually also a listener, and him and I were talking about it, and he said something that was kind of interesting, which is he says people are so busy that it's faster to click on a link where I'm going to be able to see the show notes, scan the show notes and see if there's anything that I want to listen to, and then go from there. And since you mentioned the show notes in that link, like that's the only one, like technically you can see the show notes on iTunes, and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure they're also in Spotify. But his thing was, or at least his hypothesis, or maybe even just his reason was, because that's where I can see the show notes, I can scan through and see if I want to listen to the episode. So it sounds like it might not be video. It might be something about the interaction with the show notes that's more helpful, which is kind of interesting to me because it's actually going to change how I do show notes this week, knowing that people are using them.
I was just thinking that we should try to be a little bit more copy oriented when we do the show description to see. That makes sense. I personally use Spotify. I was surprised when April said that to us because I think Spotify is great. Like, I think Spotify is my favorite. And I think about it a lot when I'm going for my walk and I'm thinking, what podcast do I want to listen to today? And I never have an episode in mind. I have a show in mind. And so then you go to that show and you start really, really scanning the titles. And I'm trying to think, like, how many times do I click that show more button to get the expanded view of the show description? Yeah, this is interesting. Like, we should really start paying attention to this.
So we're getting some interesting insights. And I think the reason we started here again this week is we just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to the people who reached out and offered their thoughts. If you are sort of listening to this and you have unique thoughts on either why you're doing this or what we could do better to kind of make this easier to navigate for you, like more interesting, let us know. I'm Damn Ethan on Twitter. Tim is at Tim Stouts. Just like holler at us.
Yeah, please. We actually, and now that you mention that, it's a little bit far back on my timeline, so I don't want to take the time to find it, but somebody who did share the show this week shared the link on the website, and that's interesting too. So yeah, let us know.
Was that John Bardos that you were talking about?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? We can edit this out.
No, I think I've already got it lined up, so I've got it.
Oh, you got it?
The guy? Yeah, the guy. Well, yeah, because I wanted to shout him out at some point. I wasn't sure if we were going to do it now, but is he the guy who's like, "Hey, Tim, you and Ethan are killing it"? And then I'm not making this up for people who are listening to.
Shoot me the DM me the
Yeah, I'll just send it to you. But he's like, he said some really nice things about the show. I don't remember if he shared a link though. So, anyways, I'll send this to Tim. But as we go, just know that like we do pay attention to a lot of this stuff. So if you guys have opinions on,
so interesting. John Bardos at Idea Economy.
Yeah.
He gave us a shout and posted the link to copybloggerpod.com. So interesting.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, John.
Never would have thought that.
I looked into his stuff too. He's got some cool stuff. So as Tim mentioned, his handle on Twitter is Idea Economy.
That's his newsletter too.
Yeah. He writes a newsletter for creators. It's definitely worth checking out. I was just cruising through some of his stuff before we hopped on here. And one piece that I really like that he did, and I like it because I have one example of this from somebody else, and I'm really happy to be able to add another version of it to this content library that I kind of go back to over time. He wrote a piece about how he got his first 2,000 subscribers, and it's super detailed. He kind of breaks it down by tiers. So like, here's how I got the first 100, then the first 200, the first 500. Then as he kind of crossed that 500 line, he moved into advertising in other newsletters. And so he does a whole breakdown of what his cost per acquisition was across different newsletters that you can advertise in. Yeah. So it's a really detailed piece. So people who are sort of just getting the ball rolling on audience, we'll link up to that piece in the show notes. And just shout out again to John for writing that because it's a pretty cool piece.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Enough pre-roll. What are we doing this week?
Okay. I struggled to find something that could possibly top Woot.com. And like, I felt a lot of pressure. I was like, man, it couldn't have gone any better. The timing of it and what we were talking about, and especially the fact that on that particular day they were selling vibrators. I was like, I can't top that. And so I looked around a lot. I was trolling on Reddit a lot. And I decided what I wanted to do actually was take a little bit step back and talk about my favorite company ever, really. It's a company that is very, very famous, but I would say also flies under the radar a little bit. And that's because it's not very social media heavy. It's not like a personal brand. It's just a freaking brilliant company. And the evolution of this company totally fits in line with what we love and what we talk about. You may have heard me talk about it before. The name of this company is Psychology Today. So I am going to share my screen. Psychology Today was founded in 1967 by Nicholas Charney. And I want to note that it was founded as a magazine. And it's one of the most successful magazines really in history. And I put this link on here because I wanted to just read it. And I wanted to give some context as to how like under the radar, but how important in like the public lexicon this has been. So this is an article that was written by Nicholas Charney with a badass picture of him with these huge, like thick glasses on. He looks so cool. It's called A Note from the Editor, published on July 4th, 2017. I'm assuming, I want to be accurate with this. I'm assuming that this is like the day of the 50-year anniversary of the publication. That's at least what I could gather from this article. Well, it's a short note. Shouldn't even call it an article. But I'm just going to read it in full because I think it really highlights how cool of a company this is. Okay. Quote, 50 years ago, in my first editorial, I wrote, psychology is a fascinating and alive subject, ready to thrive outside of academia. I hope to make it lively, clear, and technically accurate. It is a time to let the air fly in. 50 years later, psychology is even more important with more research, more tools, more applicability to more areas of the culture. If anything, it is now time to let the gale in. At 50, Psychology Today, while still graphically exciting, authoritative, and informative, is, check this out, older than Rolling Stone, New York Magazine, Mrs. Magazine, and People Magazine. Older than Sesame Street and Saturday Night Live. Older than Woodstock Music Festival and Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. But it's not as old as Scientific American, the nation's longest running magazine, published in 1845, and the model I use in developing Psychology Today. I thought that was so cool because I love how even your heroes have heroes, you know, like it made me feel good that even then everybody has like an inspiration. Okay. What started as a highly acclaimed print publication is now also a dynamic, interactive media destination for tens of millions of people each month seeking solid information about the science of living, and for millions more seeking professional help in leading a healthy, productive, rewarding life from Psychology Today's groundbreaking directory of licensed therapists. Thanks to the staff, present and past. Thank you. Okay. It's pretty remarkable, right? Here's why this business is so fascinating to me. Because it doesn't make any sense. Like, this model should not work because it tries to do way too many things at once, but somehow it just does them flawlessly. So again, this show is really catered to YouTube because we share the screen. And so I'll make sure I'm like pretty articulate in the way I explain this. When you go to the homepage, Psychology Today, it's a media company. Mm-hmm. It's helpful articles written by PhDs and clinicians. And if anything, I think they basically follow the same exact model as Bloomberg. And I mean that like quite literally. Like, Bloomberg has these key points at the top of their articles, which help a lot to create what are called rich snippets in the Google SERPs. So if somebody searches for something like this, you know how every once in a while you'll see like the search result and then you'll see those little bullet points underneath it. So these rich snippets really incentivize click through. And it's an article in the same sense of media. So there's ads. It's Google ads on the sidebar. There's an in-text Google ad, another in-text Google ad, another one, and then a footer ad, and that's it. Cool. It's an online media company, mm-hmm. which means that the monetization is completely dependent on volume of traffic, which we've talked about before. It's a tough business to be in. And not only are they killing it in that business, but they also do the thing that we love, which is like content marketing. So the content also serves as a mechanism to still sell their magazine, which is still one of the top magazines. Which, and I think you and I have talked about this before, how magazines like could and may be making a comeback. They still use the website to sell their magazine. And on top of that, they use their website as a lead gen / directory for therapists all over the world. This is the coolest part of this website, because when you create a website that is really, really technically SEO'd, as much as I love it, and one of the things I want to talk about and maybe like encourage people to try to adopt this model, because I think there's a lot of opportunity in this model. But one of the problems with it, or I shouldn't say one of the problems, one of the things to be mindful of is that once you build it, if you build it the wrong way the first time, building it the right way is very difficult. I like to think of it almost as it's like technical debt. You know, it's something that happens a lot with cities, where when you build a city, it's fine, but you build it for the population that's there. And so all the sewer lines and the electric lines and the civil services are built for a particular way. And it's not like you can take all of that stuff down and then just like rebuild it for what it needs now. Like you're always basically adding more on top. And that's one of the problems that these directory sites run into, is it's really hard to build it for what it's going to be 10 years from now. And so it can get like clogged up. You know, just imagine, I don't know why, the analogy of a city always makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But however the hell they did it, it is so goddamn perfect. So I am on the nav bar, and on the navigation bar, there's a link. It's a drop down that says find a therapist. There's a drop down that says get help. There's a drop down that says magazine. There's a drop down that says today. On the find a therapist drop down, what they have is links to the top 12 cities, probably in search volume for therapists, I would assume. And then there's a link with or a field where you can type in your zip code. Here's the real tricky part about it, and this is the part that like blows my mind. In the field where you can search for find a therapist, there's also a drop down that allows you to search for psychologists, treatment centers, and support groups. So you have to understand, when you do this, the only way to do it is dynamically. It's like so impossible to create static pages for every single one of these. But still, they've managed to figure out a way to filter it so that you're searching the same directory, except the directory automatically creates these child slugs, so that like there's literally 5 directories on this website that don't compete with each other. And it's so good. It's like, it's just the most brilliant site. I'm going to fanboy a little bit on this site because of how well it's built. So if you look on therapists.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is really interesting. So for people listening, what you're really getting here is sort of a masterclass in not just like a particular company, but this is Tim's bread and butter: content marketing plus lead gen. And here's a company that started as a magazine and is now doing a really diverse set of, or has a really diverse set of revenue sources. My question for you is, looking at this as somebody who comes from this space, if you had to guess, what do you think is the primary revenue stream for them these days? Do you think it's the content side? Okay, so lead gen.
It's the therapists. Yeah, it's the therapists.
That's really interesting. I wonder if that was baked in the entire time. I guess in the old days, it probably would have been ads in the news, in the magazine, right? Yep. They would probably still be advertising therapists there. So it's interesting to me. It would be interesting to kind of figure out at what point that became, like specifically lead gen became a big part of their online strategy.
That's exactly why I think this business is so cool, because I guess that's why I compared it to Bloomberg, because Bloomberg actually makes most of its money through the Bloomberg terminal. It's like $26,000 a year to use the terminal, something insane. I don't know. They got thousands and thousands of people who use it. And so when you think of Bloomberg, like you don't think of that back end product. You just think of the front end media, right? And same thing with Psychology Today. You don't think about this back end product, but dude, I don't know a single therapist I don't know a single one who isn't actively trying to grow their Psychology Today profile. And in addition, I know many, many therapists where if Psychology Today decided that they didn't want to list them anymore, would really, really struggle to be able to market themselves to the point where they could get the same amount of patient volume that they get from Psychology Today.
Really? Can I ask you a follow-up question? It sounds like you're pretty familiar with them. Do they happen to do annual lists, almost like the Inc. 5000 or anything like that? Do they do that for therapists?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't tell you. I'm only familiar with them. I don't know anybody from the company, by the way. I don't know anyone from Psych Today. I just know how they built it because, I mean, just look at these filters. You know, so right now I'm on the therapists directory, which is quite literally a directory inside a directory, which is really hard to do because in order to do it, you need these breadcrumbs because you need to be able to put like a sequence of events to tell Google, like, this is where you are in the website, or else they're just going to see so many pages that are, you know, this is therapists in Nashville, Tennessee. How's that any different from online therapists in Nashville, Tennessee? You know, so organizing these breadcrumbs is really important. But even with the breadcrumbs, they have all of these different tags. And so this allows them to rank for bipolar disorder therapists in Nashville, Tennessee, sex therapy therapists in Nashville, Tennessee. So like every single combination of search queries that you could combine to find a therapist, they've solved all of them through their dynamic directory.
Hold on a second. Okay, so as you're talking through this, I'm plugging this site into a couple of different tools and just kind of trying to get an idea of how they're doing some of what they're doing. So I just pulled them up on SimilarWeb, which for people who don't know, SimilarWeb is a tool that'll kind of give you rough estimates of traffic for pretty much any website that you want. So these guys are getting 20 million visits a month.
It's stupid.
Which is insane. And then here's something that's kind of interesting. I also dropped them in BuiltWith. So builtwith.com. You can drop any website in there and it will show you all the tools that they're using to kind of run the website. And they, in addition to like all the typical website stuff, they've also got Alexa Verify built into their site, which is kind of a new thing for me. I haven't seen that, but what I'm looking in the background. I don't know if you've seen this on other sites recently, Tim. Have you? Because what I'm seeing is Alexa Certify and Alexa Verification are for smart home related things. So that gets me thinking, like, are they
Amazon
building?
Bought Alexa.
Wait, Amazon bought Alexa? Oh yeah. But what I'm getting at here is like this site is built. It seems like it's built, if I'm understanding this properly, to work with smart home devices. And so that's got me thinking that they're probably trying to do something in terms of like capturing the need to find a therapist using smart home stuff, not just web. Yeah. It seems like it. I don't know. I don't know if I'm understanding all this properly, but it's kind of a unique tool that I hadn't seen come up yet. And I wonder if that's part of what's helping to drive all that traffic.
No, it could be.
Well,
so Alexa
it's also
is actually two things. There's an Alexa rating, which is basically like the McDonald's of traffic metrics. It's basically just like an assumption on how popular the website is. And so even though Amazon owns Alexa, which is the voice command hardware, basically, they also bought Alexa.com, and Alexa.com was a company that existed autonomously of the Alexa that we all know that, you know, people talk to in their living rooms. So I think what you're thinking of is like a credentialing system from Amazon. But the reason why they bought Alexa.com was so that they could start connecting voice to analog, I guess we could call it. So I think there's definitely something there where maybe these like little verification things are ways to like solidify that if somebody, you know, I'm looking at Miranda Poole right now. She's a therapist in Nashville. So maybe this is a way to solidify like, hey, Alexa, find me a therapist in Nashville, Tennessee. And it'll bring up, hi, I found Miranda Poole who
maybe
whatever. Would you like me to call her for you? I think that would work.
Maybe. Okay. I see the distinction between those two things now. I cut you off. You were talking about something else in terms of their structure though.
Yeah. Well, this is what's so wild about it. You have to understand the way the URL structure works, so psychologytoday.com is the root domain. And then this /US, this kind of also brings you to the root domain, but this is like the American version of the website, I think. Therapist is the parent category. Okay. Tennessee, this is just the child category, and then Nashville is the child category of Tennessee. But then you got these filters. So what they do with these filters is they make it so that it adds on a dynamic variable at the end of the page. So it doesn't create a new page. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not as though there's a new page that exists. Mm-hmm. It's that Psychology Today creates a new page and then just says hey, Google, here it is. So I got these filters. Let's say I go to types of therapy and I go to EMDR. So watch what happens to the URL. Do you see how all of a sudden there's this question mark? Mm-hmm. Well, if that question mark were a slash, that would mean that it's a new page. But this question mark is then the dynamic variable that says category EMDR. So I'm technically still on this page. I'm still on the page that I was just on. But now that every listing can be filtered, and you can see it right here, it's still Miranda Poole because she offers EMDR. Now, Psychology Today gets to rank for all of the therapy and Nashville keywords, but in addition, they get to rank for all the therapists who offer EMDR and Nashville keywords. So there's nothing that they don't have their hands in.
Huh. That's pretty.
It's fucking dope, wild. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. You just said but. So
no.
Is there more?
I was going to move on to another reason that I wanted to talk about directories, but it's actually a perfect timing for you to hit us with a question.
Well, I'm not sure I had a question. I'm as somebody who doesn't come from an SEO or lead gen world, I was just going to kind of recap real quick, why this is so fascinating. But before I do, it's kind of, I won't say odd, but I'll just say unusual for Psychology Today to be one of your somebody's favorite company, right? Yeah. How did you first realize these guys were killing it at this game? When did this come on your radar, and how long have you kind of been tracking them?
Yeah, I've been tracking them since the very beginning. So this was in 2010, and Psychology Today was still killing it with this model in 2010. So I learned about it then, and it was just looking at it every single day, basically dreaming of I don't know why. Maybe it was just serendipity where this company was put in front of me as a way to model after it, but I just thought the idea, here's what I loved about it. I loved that it was a business that monetized itself because you don't have to create a product. The product is built into the media. You don't have to sell it because the sales is baked in to the website through the transaction. You don't necessarily have to write copy for it because the fact that the category already ranks at Google makes it the most valuable real estate ever. So it's self-generated advertising. It's a self-generated product, and it's a self-generated merchant application. I don't have to send paperwork to fill out a credit card. I don't have to really do anything. All you got to do is create content and get the category at the top of the keyword. So that just fascinated me. And that's how the whole entire thing came into my head. And since then, I've just learned more about the model, learned that they were a magazine. Wow, when have you ever heard of a magazine actually successfully transitioning itself into a monster digital brand that isn't, gutting out its numbers like BuzzFeed, right? They're actually a successful media brand off the back of traditional print. So it fascinated me.
This is one of the reasons I love having these conversations, is because your background and my background overlap, but we come at content and small business or large business from different directions. So the first thing you notice here is the revenue model and their SEO setup, which for people who I think are familiar with SEO or at least know the importance of it, this is a really interesting case study that you need to go check out. I think people who maybe are a little less familiar with SEO just understand that the thing that Tim's really keying in on here is that their site is set up in a way that's pretty unique. It's difficult to get these sort of link structures right. And there's a lot of people who do it wrong. And actually, I don't remember if you said this on the air, but a couple of weeks ago, we recorded an episode where you actually walked me through a business that I was thinking about buying. And It was a lead gen company. And I can't remember if you said this part on air or after we were done recording, but I had asked you something about like plug and play tools that are used to build these types of directories. And you said, well, yeah, there are some, but the problem with the plug and play tools that exist out there is that they don't get the link structure right.
Yep.
Like they all suck for SEO. And so all these people who are doing their own directories, they're mostly building, or not, I don't think you said mostly building from scratch, but they struggle with this issue where this link structure is not done well, which seems to be a huge part of SEO. So this is a really interesting case study from that perspective. But there's something else that's going on here. So like when I start hearing about these companies, I instantly drop them into this sort of feedback loop. I did mention a couple of them, like SimilarWeb is one that I love to look at. I look at Built With to try to get a feel for actually like what's going on behind the scenes. I look at the archive. And so as we were talking here a second ago, I said it would be really interesting to know at what point they started doing lead gen. And I plugged them into archive.org. So if you just go to archive.org, way at the top, there's this thing called the Wayback Machine. For people who don't know, you can plug pretty much any website in there. And a lot of them have been crawled and screenshotted by this archive tool. So you can go back and you can look at old versions of websites. What's unique about this, though, is that it's actually been excluded from the archive, which is so odd because this company's been around forever. And at first I thought maybe that's because they're a media company and there's some issue with that. But I just checked New York Times and New York Times is in the archive. And so
because they're too big. It takes too much bandwidth for a Wayback Machine to crawl the whole thing.
Do you think so though? Because it's New York Times. Like New York Times has and I'm just typing in the homepage, which I don't know. I don't know how archive works behind the scenes, but my guess would be that all you have to do is land on the homepage and screenshot it. So that's kind of unique from a content company perspective. And my first thought was, well, maybe, they've just got like, there's that, whatever that file is in your website structure where you can block bots. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, absolutely not. If they're killing it on SEO. So I have no idea why they've been excluded from the archive, but it's definitely a really interesting case study in terms of like a media company that has transitioned. And I've only seen at scale, you bring up a great point, which is that there aren't many that have successfully gone from the old model of print media, which was largely like newsstand purchases, door-to-door subscriptions, and like advertising inside the publication. Not many companies have really successfully pivoted to anything other than that. New York Times is one. So New York Times now makes more of their revenue from online subscriptions than they do from anything else, even though they still run ads, they still do online ads, and they still have like physical subscriptions. They're a digital first company and they made that switch successfully. A lot of companies have struggled with this. So here's the thing that kind of got me about this early on too. When you started talking about the history of this company and just how old it is compared to other really well-known media sources, when you really go back and look at how those companies were built, they're fascinating. And I think a lot of them are underappreciated these days. Like
I do too.
And I think we've talked about this. We talked about it right when I first saw this, but there's a docudrama all about Playboy, the Playboy magazine. It's called, I think it's called American Playboy, but people can find it. It's one of those docudramas. But what's so interesting about it is it shows you how cutting edge Playboy was early on. And like, there's this joke that goes around now where it's like, oh, I read Playboy for the articles. But what you see inside that documentary is that there was a point when that actually was kind of a valid argument. Like Playboy was doing stuff with editorial strategy that was totally new, totally cutting edge. And they were one of the first ones to go into radio, one of the first ones to go into television, one of the first ones to do like in-person sort of event experiences around a media company. They were just, they were on the cutting edge of every single media revolution over the last 60 years or so. Mm. But now, nobody thinks of them for any of that. And so it's so interesting to go back in time and just look at these old media companies who've been around for decades and really break down how they started and how they pivoted and stuff. If you have the time to do it, it's super cool.
This is another good example of that for sure. And I would love to see that documentary. I want to also give my insight on two things. I like talking about this because this is the reason why I think anybody who wants to start an online company should start with like a local media site. And then I'll share my screen again and I'll show you the two examples that I've had like moderate success with. The only reason why I haven't had real success with this is because I don't have the time. But like, take this model and copy it. Seriously. But then I will also show you the downside of not being able to custom build your directory. And I'll give like a solution on how, if you really, really wanted to do it, you could do it. So if you're thinking like, man, I want to start something, I just don't know what it is. This is what you should do. And by the way, I've been trying to talk Ethan into doing this with me for quite a while. So maybe this will be a good opportunity. All right. So I got two websites right here. One of them is called yourboulder.com, YOURBOULDER. It's a local media website based on Boulder, Colorado. And there's another one called bocadigest.com. Boca Digest is based off of Boca Raton. They have two separate themes. And the truth is, one of the big mistakes I made with Your Boulder is I rebuilt the thing, and I shouldn't have. I should have just left it alone, which is like a common thing a common huge mistake that I've made in my life. And here, if you want to see something funny, Ethan, check this out. Look at how bad I fucking destroyed my website.
Oh, no. So the organic traffic was like 20,000 a month, and now it's like a quarter of that. That hurts,
it's even worse when you look at it the all time.
That's just from the change of structure, or was that an algorithm
change of structure? Because like I was trying to solve for the fact that the plugin I was using wasn't ideal for domain structure. And so like this did teach me a really, really valuable lesson. And that is that sometimes you can think about things too hard and you can get over technical with it. Where like this is another reason why I'm more and more convinced about how sophisticated Google is with maybe the technical SEO doesn't matter so much as it's like, are you solving the user's problem? And if you are, like, we'll kind of forgive you for the technical stuff just because we know that this is what the user is searching for. Okay. So here's really the model. You can just make a straight up directory and that's cool. The problem with it is that it's very, very difficult to drive any meaningful traffic that yellowpages.com just can't get. And so like it's hard to build a really legitimate business if you're just building a directory. And so what you need to do is the Psych Today model, which is you combine the media, you use the media to basically send traffic to the business directory, maybe even write articles that can also rank for keywords that would send some traffic to the directory. So an example is if it's a local media site and you got a category for like restaurants and then you have a subcategory for burgers, you could write an article that's like the 5 best places to get a cheeseburger in Boulder, Colorado. And then somewhere on that article, you could link to the category. And now all of a sudden, every cheeseburger shop who's reading that article is going to be like, oh my gosh, like I can advertise on this category and people are going to find me. So to really get success, you want the two to work in tandem. I'm going to show now the Boca Digest version because although this is such a simple theme, when I lived in Boca and like I was giving a little bit of effort on this, it was just killing it, man. It was killing it. So
what do you mean when you say killing it? Like it was getting a ton of traffic, or this was like a great revenue driver for you?
A little bit of both. I was selling, a ton of traffic. That's relative, right? Boca, I think, has 150,000 people on it. Actually, probably more. I don't even know why I came up with that number. I was generating about 3 or 4 emails a day. I had a pretty cool autoresponder that was selling the directory listings. And in addition, I created, this is a little bit of my like entrepreneurial stuff. I built another website for Stodzy that I called Stodzy Media. And I ranked that website for digital marketing in Boca Raton. So it's a little sub company that I did to just try to capture the Boca market. I figured, screw it. I got all this attention in Boca. Let me grab a couple local media or local businesses and I advertise my own company on here.
Okay. So that's really interesting. And that's actually something that I don't think I have seen many people talk about. I have seen people more and more start talking about the opportunity in local newsletters, local websites, stuff like these two sites.
Yeah.
For the reasons that you're saying, which is that, the competition is a little bit, it's not the same. You're not competing on the same level for sure. Also, local businesses need better solutions for advertising. So there's a big opportunity there, especially when it comes to content. Like, there's so many cities. Just take the U.S. alone. There's so many places that you can go. They've all got businesses in them, and practically none of them have good content written about what to do there, except for the big cities. Yeah. Okay, so there's a huge opportunity there, but what I don't think people talk about enough, which is really cool you did here, is how you could use local media to build a service company. And just build these local companies, these super local directories, which can be businesses on their own, but can also rank you up for the service that you provide within a specific location.
Yeah. And that was the majority of where the revenue from this came from, because they're local businesses. So I couldn't charge the $5,000 a month plus that I can for Stodzy, but for Stodzy Media, granted, my company is called Stodzy. The second website I made was stodzymedia.com. I threw it up and I just did internet marketing, Boca Raton, and a couple of surrounding cities. And these were clients that I could charge, $1,500, $2,000 a month for. And I was mostly just managing their Google My Business profiles. And so I'd be making $800 a month and built a small team around it. So yeah. So there's an idea. I'm not necessarily trying to highlight that, although you being ever observant, and you always find oh, I see how he's actually making money from it. But what I would do, first off, this theme is really great. If you go to studiopress.com, it's a Genesis theme. It's called the magazine theme. It's very easy to use. It's super SEO friendly. Anything Genesis is SEO friendly. And in this business directory, I laid out the categories. So it is quite literally called the business directory plugin. That's what the plugin is called. And the reason why this is the best option is because all other business directory software makes it so that the entire website is a directory and the media is kind of an add-on. But you want to do the opposite. You want to build a media company where the directory is the product, And it stinks because business directory plugin has some major, major flaws. One of them is what I'm about to show you. So if I'm on the directory, I'm at bocadigest.com/business directory. This is fine. This is basically the homepage of the directory. But now I'm going to click on a category. So I'm going to click on the advertising and marketing category, and you can see what happens. So the plugin itself needs this, because without this category, the website wouldn't be able to tell the difference between one of the blog categories and the directory categories. So then it has this awful URL parameter in the middle. It's WPBDB_categories. So it quite literally means WordPress business directory plugin _category. And then the actual category, which is advertising and marketing. So if you did it right, it would look like this. It would be bocadigest.com/advertising and marketing. That would be the parent category. And so what happens when you click on a listing? This isn't bad, and I had to custom code this. So the listing is still the child category. So it's still bocadigest.com/business directory/click media incorporated, which is fine. That's fine. But the real problem, and God, I'm telling you this because if anybody has some software skills and understand WordPress, you could build one of these things and make so much goddamn money. The real problem is this. The real problem is that it doesn't allow for you to create individual sales pages for whatever tier of the directory that you're buying. So the conversion rate on it was so freaking low because somebody signs up for the email list. They're like, oh, I'm a local business. I want to advertise here. Well, the only place I can send them is this page, is this submit listing. Mm-hmm. And so there's a drop down where you have to choose your category. And then there's a drop down of the different options. So I only have one option here for this exact reason, because I have to funnel people into the option that I want them to see, as opposed to all these different choices. And then they click next. And then there's all the information they got to fill out. And then they click next. And then there's the credit card. And then they click next again. And then they have to submit their email and a password because they have to create an account in WordPress to create their listing, right? So like it sucks because it is so close, but all it needs is a sales page that says like, give us your email, create a password, here's your credit card. And then when you sign up for it, then you just get straight up access to your listing and the business can fill out the listing afterwards. But it just makes it so hard to actually sell them because it wants to sell them on the front end of the website as opposed to the back end once you've already created your profile.
That's wild. That's a great opportunity. I'm really glad that you actually highlighted that. How many, like, if you had to guess, just based on what you know of this industry, my guess would be a lot, but like how many websites do you think are trying to do something like this right now?
Not a lot.
Really?
No. Dude, I'm telling you, like, people cannot get their head out of the newspaper gutter. Like, people need local media, and local media as we know it is gone. It's never going to come back. Like, it's never going to come back.
Okay.
You know,
they're stuck
and
with an
so
old
people
model.
just still want to create these local media sites. And they're just like more and more traffic, which means more and more junk. And if you want lots of junk, where do you go? You go to Facebook, right?
Yep.
And so like, it's the same conversation as last time. Like you can't out Amazon, and local media companies keep trying to out Facebook, and it's just not going to happen. So you have to build a local media site that has like an identity and that has like, that is actually in the community, you know, like if you want to do these, show up for local business launches and maybe pop your head into the local chamber of commerce, which is really what you should do because that's how I sold all my listings. And then like create a product around your local media site. And this is the way to do it because again, the product sells itself. The product is valuable just by nature of the site existing. So there's not like an extra add-on. Like if you like this, you're really going to love this. The whole thing is you love this because it exists. It'll work. But this was always my Achilles heel with it, man. And so that's why I tried to do it with your Boulder and we did it. I mean, I spent a bunch of money on it, but I killed all my traffic by trying to do it. So it's a real conundrum.
That's so interesting. Wow. Okay. So Psychology Today, fascinating case study. Yeah. Like we went all the way down the rabbit hole on that one.
This is like the biggest, because you can do it with anything. Like it doesn't have to be local media. You can build directories around anything. The problem is that people in their minds just think it's either got to be media or it's got to be directory. And like, no, the media is the advertising, is the marketing for the directory.
Can you just take a minute and walk people through the thinking process behind choosing a topic for one of those? So, because you said like it can be anything, and I'm curious to hear how you actually think through what types of directories are worth spending your time on versus which ones aren't. So we've talked a couple of times in the past about things like, well, one of the reasons you're focused on healthcare is because there's sort of like a relatively high, well, part of it is there's a personal connection there, but also there's a relatively high customer lifetime value inside of that range. So, you could build a business there that can send leads and sort of thrive. What are some of the ways that you think through what actually makes a good directory topic? So that if people are sitting here going, yeah, Tim's right, I'm going to do this for XYZ, like give them 2 or 3 questions they can ask to just battle test that idea.
Yeah, that's like a really great question. And I've never done that thought experiment. Well, I've already doubled this down and I'll say it one more time. Local media is the obvious one. And the reason is because people are starving for local content. Like people love to read about their neighborhoods. All of these articles I would write would take off.
Can I, let me just add a little detail to clarify too. I'm thinking, let's say the media side of it is going to be local media. But in terms of who I'm driving leads for via these directories, if you were to do this, you said it doesn't just have to be, actually, I forget your exact words, but you said something along the lines of like, you can do this for anything. It doesn't just have to be what we're talking about here. So assuming I'm going to write like pieces about local events that are going on, places to eat, all that kind of stuff, how would you think through who you're actually selling directory listings to in order to target like the most successful opportunities in that space?
Yeah, well, it's business owners that don't know marketing. right? Like us digital marketers take it for granted because our job is to market ourselves. And so like by the nature of that, we're surrounded by people who are naturally good at marketing. Well, actually, you know what? What I did and the best thing to do is go to Google My Business and pretend like you're creating a profile and just scrape all of the categories that they use in their own Google My Business listing. So like if you want to create a Google My Business listing, you have to submit a category. And so all of the categories on Boca Digest and your border are nothing but scrapes from that. That's how I would do it.
That's brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, that's how I would do it.
I heard this term used the other day on a different podcast. I was done a couple appearances over on Content is Profit. And those guys are hilarious. Luis and Luis, they're two brothers and they just got like great energy, but they always talk about golden boulders. They're like, oh, so many golden boulders are going to fall today in this conversation. And then when you say something cool, they're like, that was a golden boulder. And I think, Tim, that was like a golden boulder. So shout out to Luis and Luis. And shout out to that idea, which is like, just, there's that saying, like, good artists, what is it? Good artists
steal.
Yeah, good artists, whatever, and then great artists steal. So go steal people's categories. That's a great way to just kind of narrow it down. Was there anything else that you wanted to point out about this like business model or this case study?
Only that you should do it. Like it's perfect for three ways. You can run ads on the content itself. Mm-hmm. You can run ads on the newsletter and make your newsletter local events, by the way. It can't miss. Just a weekly newsletter about all the events going on this weekend. And you can make it so obvious, like Friday, bullet points of events, Saturday, bullet points of events, Sunday, and Sunday is usually like yoga in the park and, like the 5K walk and stuff like that. So The content monetizes itself. The newsletter will monetize itself. The newsletter serves as a function to sell listings to the directory, and then the directory monetizes itself. Like I told you though, it's just the arrow through the heel of our hero Achilles is the fact that it needs a better sales process because people just don't got time. If you're a local business owner and you run a juice shop and you got like 8 minutes in between customers and you're looking at this stuff, like you are not going to take 9 minutes to fill out your profile before you even put in your credit card. Like the credit card needs to come first and then they need to get an email that says like, you've created your profile. Now fill it out. It's just,
would it be legal?
It gets me so much.
Would it be legal? Maybe you know this because you come from this world. Yeah, I think that it could be really cool as part of that process to just be like, when you're filling out, maybe there could be a very, very, very brief form. It's like, what's your name? What is your business name? And what is the city that you're in? And then it just pulls the Google listing.
You can do that.
Can you just do that and be like, hey, here's the Google listing. We're going to use this basic information for you. Just give us your credit card number. And then you can edit it afterwards if you want to. That would be a way to do it, right?
Yeah. You could probably even use ThriveCart. You could use ThriveCart to complete the transaction. You wouldn't be able to like API into the Google listing itself.
No, yeah, but
you could do it.
Yeah, if you're just pulling it, you're just searching for the Google listing. You're not saying that you could help them update their Google listing. But if they wanted to update it, you could sell them that service on the back end.
That's it.
Boom. That's a golden boulder, Tim. We can't steal that. We're going to have to come up with our own version.
We totally can.
I love that.
It's already stolen. Thanks, Luis and Luis.
I love that. We should have them on. They're a lot of fun. Okay. This was really cool. I'm glad you walked through this. And for people who are interested in doing this, go do this. It seems like there's a big opportunity here. Let us know if you do it. And before you go do it, go watch the video of this episode because I think you did a great job of talking all the way through this, but just visually, you'll be able to see some of the URL structures a little bit quicker and stuff like that. It'll just save you some time. So go do that. This was cool, man.
Yeah, this was really cool. I hope somebody takes advantage of it.
Yeah, me too. I hope we hear about it. Before we wrap up, can I shout out one or two things that I think people might want to check out?
Yeah, please.
Did you see that article that Tim Ferriss shared a couple of weeks ago about the dangers of audience capture?
Oh, but he shared that a while ago, right? Where he talks about people email him that they're thinking about committing suicide and stuff.
No, he did share. I've seen what you're talking about. That was a really interesting one.
Yeah, that was heavy.
Yeah, that was probably 2 years ago, like right before COVID kicked off or something like that.
Yeah.
No, this just came out in Five Bullet Friday, like a week or two ago, and he didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it, but it's a really interesting. I wanted to talk about this with you, and maybe we'll have to save the bigger conversation for next week.
Yeah, save it for next week.
Yeah, for people who want to check it out, and I'll just tee this up so that maybe you can come back next week and we'll talk about it more. It's this really interesting article about I think it actually ties in with this whole issue of psychology, like the psychology magazine. It's talking about the issue that creators face when they sort of play into their persona too much and their audience begins to drive their life. And specifically, he talks about this person, like, have you ever heard of this guy, Nico Avocado?
No, but he looks familiar.
Yeah, I don't want to bag too much on him because it seems like he's going through a tough time as like just a person in general and a content creator. And he's got a huge audience and there's a ton of pressure that comes with that. But he's kind of this unfortunate case study of somebody who started out. Yeah.
Is that for real?
Yeah. He started making like videos about health food or like vegan food and then just slowly kept adapting to what was performing better and better and better until eventually he's like now well known for these just incredible amounts of food that he eats on camera. And it's had a really negative effect on his health. But he uses that as an example, a broader example of the challenges that content creators face when it comes to really defining what your own path is going to be and how to manage expectations inside this arena, which I think could be really fun to talk about. So we'll tee that up for next week.
I'd love to. That's important. We all struggle with that.
I think so. And it's changed how I'm thinking about things like Twitter and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that next week. I think there's a whole conversation there to have. And then just one more thing, this jumped out at me right before we jumped on here. A lot of people listening to this will already know Neville Medora, but I wanted to shout him out and just say that I think he's going to be a really interesting Twitter follow for the next couple of months. Well, I mean, he'll probably always be an interesting Twitter follow. Like specifically right now, he set a goal of going from about 24,000 followers on Twitter to 100,000. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, he wants to get to 100,000 by the end of the year. So that's about 4 months. You know, I sort of know him a little bit just from interacting at some like events and stuff in Austin and consuming some of his like content over the years. But I'll tell you, he seems like kind of a troublemaker in a good way. You know how there's like people out there who can create content that's really eye-catching and stirs stuff up. He's already executing on this plan to get like 100,000 followers or whatever, 70,000 followers, 75,000 followers over the next couple of months. And I just wanted to share some of the things that he's done in doing that because I really, really like it. So one, he just did this tweet thread that takes this famous image. There's a famous image of a guy during the Depression and he's wearing a sign that says, I know 3 trades, I speak 3 languages, I fought for 3 years, I have 3 children and no work for 3 months, but I only want 1 job. This is a really famous image and people use this a lot as like an example of copywriting, an example of ad strategy, stuff like that. Well, Neville posted this picture and goes, can you spot why this guy's still totally poor? And then did this entire breakdown about like how he would change this sign in order to be like better copywriting. So what I loved about this was that, you know, he takes a very, I would say like playfully confrontational stance on these things. So I think he's going to be fun to follow for that reason. And the other one that he did recently, I think he just posted this today. Did you see this? Where
no, I don't
he talks
think I follow Neville. That's the copywriting dude.
Yeah, copywriting course. He's like the OG copywriting course guy. Now everyone's got their copywriting course, but I think everyone basically learned from Neville. So he just posted this entire thread on, it says right at the top, semi-illegal marketing idea. You're quote unquote sort of allowed to write on US money. It's a gray area of the law, but technically if you do something like this and he's got an image, it's within the law. And so he lays out this entire...
so smart.
Yeah. But both of these share something in common, which is that they're like kind of like troublemaker type content. You know, he's not here to take prisoners. He's here to stir things up. And I think it's going to be fun to just keep an eye on him in the course of the next couple of months. So it's at NevMed on Twitter. Go check him out. And if you haven't gotten into his stuff, like we talk a lot about copywriting here. He's definitely an interesting person to.
I'll follow him. He's a smart guy. I've read a lot of his articles. I just haven't followed him.
Yeah, I hadn't followed him either until recently, but I've just been paying more attention to his stuff. And I'm like, you know, to me, he has a lot of traits in common with Sam. in that they're both very good at like that mischievous kind of attention getting types of content where it's like, it's not, or like mischievous. I'm not even sure mischievous is the right term because it's never malicious, but it's always out there to kind of stir the pot.
Yeah. It's riding like an antagonistic trend.
Yeah, it's just sort of, it's like stuff that's got a high likelihood of gathering velocity. People are going to talk about it. You know what it is? It's like people are either going to love it or hate it. And that's, I think, rare for content creators. When you find people like that, you got to keep an eye on them. So anyways, those are some things that I thought would be kind of fun to just tack on at the end here. This was great, dude. Yeah.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking about this. Thank you to everybody who followed along. I got my kid crying in the other room, so I got to bounce. But before I do, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people know that Neil Gaiman has been like a really, really influential person for me and my writing. And The Sandman, the graphic novel series, is like an absolute literary masterpiece and everybody should read it. And the show adaptation is trending #1 on Netflix right now. And I was so nervous that they were going to fuck it up, but it's brilliant. And this is really quintessential with Neil Gaiman. He's done this with like basically all of his adaptations. American Gods, he was really like on, on production, making sure that they stayed true to the scene. There's another one, Bad Omens, where he co-wrote it. And the Netflix show was really, really on point. The ending was slightly different, but not really. It was pretty on point. And man, Sandman is so good. It is so good. So everybody listen to this. If you haven't read Sandman, I highly suggest you go and you read at least the first novel because the season 1 of Sandman on Netflix is basically like exactly the first novel, with some variations. But if you can, go read the first novel and then, or skip it. I don't care. Watch Sandman on Netflix because it's dope. But yeah, that's my shout out.
All right. I'm going to check it out, man. I've heard people rave about Sandman forever, and I've never gotten into it. But now that there's like an easy on-ramp, I think maybe today's the day.
Yeah. Everyone, thank you so much. I got to get out of here. All right, Ethan, thanks for jumping on Saturday, bro. And we'll talk to you next week.
Likewise. Later, people.
Later.